Ukrainian intelligence agencies likely take out 2 traitors that switched over to the Russian side, while Russia keeps up the pressure and has some gains at Avdiivka. But on the other hand, according to Russian mill bloggers, the situation at Krinky along the Dnipro is getting more serious. This and more in the situation report. First of all, I want to apologize in case you hear something in the background. We have a power outage and I'm sitting in front of a fan to not melt here. So just as an explanation if it sounds somewhat weird. To start off, on the Eastern Front in the north, we have Russian attacks towards Sinkivka here. We have attacks towards Petropavlivka, towards Novoselivske here, towards Terny and in the Serebryanske forest, which are here and down here. The Russians say that they managed to capture the northern part of Sinkivka. As of now, I have not seen any visual evidence yet, and I have not seen my usually fairly reliable Ukrainian sources admitting defeat there. So it might be true, it might not be true. As of now, I cannot confirm anything in this regard. Also, the Russians are saying that the Ukrainian side is reinforcing here. They say the 3rd Battalion of the 43rd Infantry Brigade, as well as units of the border forces, have arrived to reinforce this front line. And according to the Russians, the Ukrainians built additional fortification lines with, and that's a quote, powerful fortifications, whatever that means. But in this area, supposedly they are starting to build up their positions in case they are being pushed back further south. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have additional Russian attacks towards Bilohorivka, Spirne and Vesele. No successes in this regard. The Russians have additional successes at Hromove, especially here towards the north. They managed to advance further. I'm still not having a full conclusive result whether or not the last few houses in Hromove are still in Ukrainian hands. According to the Ukrainians, they still are, but I have not seen any visual evidence in this regard. The Russians also have had additional attacks, did additional attacks towards Bodanivka. I cannot confirm any fresh results here, even though over the past few days they have advanced in this direction. And here in the Dachas in the south of Bakhmut, which were still mostly under Ukrainian control, the Russians managed to advance in this area here. So only this part now is under Ukrainian control in this region. Also, the Russian managed to advance here north of Klishivka along the ridgeline here, increasing the pressure towards the town itself. And further attacks by the Russians were started and performed in the direction of Andriivka, but there I cannot confirm any successes. We have a number of Ukrainian counterattacks from Bodanivka in the Dachas at Klishivka and Andriivka, as well as Kurdyumivka. No success whatsoever can be recorded for these Ukrainian counterattacks from my side. If we switch down now to along the front line towards Avdiivka, we have Russian attacks reported at Novobakhmutivka in the direction of Novokalinove. I cannot confirm that they had fresh successes here, but we do know that they keep pushing along the railroad line here as well. In Stepove, there was a Ukrainian counterattack, though, in a video that is visible, and we see the Ukrainians pushing along the roads here and pushing further into that Russian position here. The Russians still hold a position inside of the town. They might have been pushed back a few houses, but overall Stepove is still divided between both sides. Further south, we had a Ukrainian counterattack being successful in this southern area. We see Ukrainian soldiers reaching that line. That is where the execution or the killing of 2 Ukrainian prisoners of war happened a couple of days ago. Now they managed to take back the positions. As of now, we do not know whether they have actually occupied it or just cleared them and withdrawn under Russian artillery fire. But we at least know that the Russians lost those positions over the last few days. We also have a Russian attack going towards Berdichi that is being reported somewhere in this direction. No success of this whatsoever, though, can be recorded. At the coke plant here, where the fighting is Continuing, we do have visual evidence of the Russians getting closer to it. There's fresh video evidence that shows the Russians reaching these 2 points here. So basically along this, and for us as an orientation, it's exactly where the boat turns around here. And if we can see this, it's here. So we do know that the Russians have reached these positions. We see the in the video that I can't show you, there are drone pilots, Ukrainian drone pilots, dropping munitions on them, and these munitions fall into fortifications, into trenches. So we know that the Russians now have a permanent position here, which means that the Russian controlled line should be advanced to that point as of now. Further south of the hill here, of the waste heap, we have additional successes as well for the Russians. First, the Russians advanced towards here, another fresh geolocalization along this basin, reservoir, whatever it is. We see them in this area here. So up to this is Russian presence now, and a second one is with a FPV drone hitting, and we see the Russians having reached this point here. So basically, let me just check again. Yeah, it's that forward line here where the Russians have reached now and taken positions as well. So they creep forward, but they do get forward. It's fairly slow, but they managed to achieve additional successes. Russian attacks are also being reported at Siverne. No success being confirmed here. There seems to have been additional minor success in this area of Pervomaiske, where they advanced additionally forward. And that is it for the area of Avdiivka. Here in the south, we have fighting at Marinka and Novomikhailivka. According to Russian mill bloggers, the Ukrainians attempt to take back the initiative at Marinka. I guess it's the interpretation Russian mill bloggers take because of these attacks north of the water here that were successful to a certain extent. And the Russians themselves confirm that they have not fully cleared the city of Marinka yet. In this area, there should still be Ukrainian positions that are still under Ukrainian control, though. So while they have reached the southwestern part of the southwestern end of Marinka, they do not control anything south of that water here yet either. Further south, there was fighting close to Wuhledar, but inconclusive, and we have additional attacks on Staromayorske by the Russians. Usually they try to go along those two tree lines, but neither of those attacks can be confirmed to have been successful, so the front line seems to be unchanged as of now. At Orikhiv, the Russians managed to advance in this area here. We have a hill here overlooking the area a little bit, and especially the entrance towards Verbove. That's why the Ukrainians pushed forward here to try to reach between Novofedorivka and Verbove, and thus forcing the Russians to retreat from both towns, or at least get fire control over them. A Russian counterattack has been successful in this area and pushed the Ukrainians back. Ukrainians themselves attacked west of Robotine and towards Novoprokopivka, but I cannot confirm that those attacks have had any success whatsoever. Also, Ukrainian attacks are reported towards Verbove. Where exactly, if on this hill or further south, I cannot confirm, but they have been unsuccessful anyways, so the exact position probably doesn't matter too much. We switch over to the bridgehead over the Dnipro. The Russians report additional Ukrainian attacks at Krinky. In one case, they say they managed to advance in the forest line, but were driven back later. So at least according to the Russians, and I do not see anything contradicting from the Ukrainian side, the overall control of territory has not changed at this very moment. But we have a Russian military blogger who said, we will no longer say, and that's a quote, we will no longer say that the sector is not a problem for the Russian Federation's armed forces. So the intensity here increases. He mentioned that in the context of high intensity of Ukrainian attacks and the Ukrainians bringing in additional forces. According to other mill bloggers, the Ukrainians bring in reinforcement, but just to keep their own deployed units steady. As of now, we do not see any reinforcements having been successful to a degree that they can change the overall dynamics of the situation here. The Russians also said in the last 24 hours They used more than 100 glide bombs just in this area here, just in probably more than this, probably down here as well. But they said in Dnipro, on both sides of the river, over 100 glide bombs just in this area. So that's a high intensity of bombardment, obviously, because any glide bomb has at the very least 500 kilos, which shows the size of the explosives carried is no comparison to artillery shells. Over 100 of those a day is quite a significant bombardment that is happening here. That's not all though. On the Crimean Peninsula we have Ukrainian drone attacks. They have happened mostly in the eastern region on Feodosia as well as positions around Kerch. Here the Ukrainians say they destroyed an oil terminal at Feodosia, and several different radar systems were destroyed, as well as a SAM control system. The Russians say they shot down 35 to 41 drones, depending on which Russian source you rely upon. And while we have confirmation of explosions being heard in this region, we do not know whether this means that drones were shot down and they exploded, or the SAMs exploded, or whether it was impacts on the ground. As of now, at least, I have not seen confirmation of that oil terminal being damaged, of the radar stations being destroyed. It's possible, but I cannot independently confirm it. When it comes to partisan activity and sabotage, the fresh news is going around in pro-Ukrainian circles that Ilya Kiva, who is a former member of the right sector and who switched sides in 2022 and lived close to in the Moscow area. He asked, for instance, in a letter to President Putin to be given Russian citizenship. He was found dead recently, like in the last few hours. Obviously, as of now, we do not know the reason for that, and while there might be a natural cause, it seems fairly unlikely regarding the circumstances and regarding that he was barely over 50, so not necessarily in the age where you die of a heart attack automatically, where natural causes are the main cause of death, especially for turncoats towards the Russians. At the same time, Oleg Popov, who was a deputy in the so-called Luhansk People's Republic, became victim of a car bomb. There, it's unclear as of now. The news is very fresh as well. I do not have seen any confirmation at the time of the recording. There were some reports that he was dead, other reports that he was in hospital with non-life-threatening wounds. As of now, we do not know, but the likelihood obviously is again that it was the SBU or the GUR. If somebody like this dies through a car bomb in eastern Ukraine, it's usually the Ukrainian intelligence agencies, even though we do not have confirmation from the Ukrainians for either of those cases. When it comes to troop generation, we have an article here in Kommersant that the workers are getting scarce in Russia. There is an estimate that 2 to 4 million workers will be missing in Russia until 2030. 90% of those in semi-educated and educated positions in important industries. Obviously, right now, military and industry are competing about personnel, as the workers are in working age are potential soldiers as well, while at the same time not only do the Russians suffer hundreds of thousands of casualties that are then have to be replaced by probably competing again with the defense industry, while at the same time up to 1 million Russians have fled the country since the beginning of the war, and thus taking themselves out of the potential for recruits, for mobilized personnel, as well as for the workforce as well. The Russian Ministry of Defense at the same time announced that it wants to change the criteria for sicknesses which would exclude from military service. They want to change it that sicknesses, that diseases that do not hinder at the military work should no longer allow you to be excluded from work. Obviously, what comes to mind is something like HIV. As long as you don't have AIDS, you're still like normally working. You can still be used as a frontline soldier. And we've heard about it in the past that, for instance, Wagner used patients with tuberculosis and with HIV for their assaults, and it seems to have been a proven concept, while people with these sicknesses were usually declined by the Russian armed forces. Now we see that the Russians want to include them as well. If you want to be cynical, you could say using them on the front line will lessen the burden on the medical services inside of Russia as well. Rostec has announced a new IFF, a system for the identification of friend or foe. The system IFFs usually work that a radar is pinging a target, and the target then sends a signal back, an encrypted signal, basically telling the radar, hey, I'm friendly, to prevent it from being shot down. And according to Rostec, they designed something that can be used, that is miniature and can be used for drones. And the overall weight of the system supposedly is only 150 grams, which would allow it probably even close to consumer drones, being used on consumer drones. And Rostec claims it works until an altitude of 5 kilometers and up to 100 kilometer in range. So apparently there has been a problem identified in the past, and now it's getting addressed. Obviously, with increased air defense work towards drones, there will be an increased danger of friendly fire, that own drones are being shot down. So IFFs will be needed, and according to that, Rostec has developed a system according to it. According to Ukraine, Ukrainian informations, prisoner recruits for the Storm Z units that had been in prison until the 20th of October, who were confirmed to be in prison on the 20th of October, have already been seen in combat here close to Kupiansk, meaning they have had more or less a month of training, the most, until they were deployed in combat. Anyone who has served knows that a month in training doesn't really teach you very much. I mean, obviously in peacetime and with Storm Z recruits, you might be able to cut down a lot of training. If I just remember my time, how long we learned to march properly, how long we learned how to pack our stuff in the cabinets, how to make our beds, things like that can always be cut down in times of war, but 1 month will still be far too low to turn them into anything more than cannon fodder. At the same time, Nepal is saying that 6 of its citizens have died fighting for Russia. They say that Russia is recruiting Nepalese to fight for its armed forces. According to the Nepalese, there are 150 to 200 citizens of the country that are fighting for Russia, which is illegal, because while Nepal has a long tradition of mercenaries, they are exclusively being allowed for India and for Great Britain, the famous Gurkhas in both cases. But at the same time, it's a tradition that is several hundred years old now, at least 200 years if I recall correctly, of whole tribes competing to be one of the few selected mercenaries. So the whole acceptance of fighting for another country for money is very high in certain regions of Nepal, which should allow for the Russians to hire to be able to recruit a fair amount there, and to no surprise the Russians managed to do that. But at the same time, the premier of the country said, the prime minister said, at the same time some are also fighting on the Ukrainian side. Also, Putin is right now visiting the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and is expected to visit Saudi Arabia later. There are videos of Putin being received in the United Arab Emirates with the Russian tricolors painted in the sky and things like this. So he's being received with full honors, showing that the Western's initiatives towards isolating Russia has not been successful to a degree which the West would have hoped for, as especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia were in the past being considered to be, well, close to the Western sphere of influence, at least close to it. Also, we have information about international support. Rheinmetall has signed a contract with Ukraine with the volume of 142 million euros for 105mm grenades. The delivery is until 2025, and next year Rheinmetall wants to increase its production capacity to 700,000 grenades a year, which it achieved, among others, by buying, for instance, a factory inside of Spain. So not all of it is generic increase of production capacity inside of NATO. Some of it was simply bought from other potential suppliers as well. And Finland, at the same time, has also announced that they want to increase their own grenade production, especially with Ukraine in mind. So Ukraine should receive additional additional ammunition through that as well. That was already it from me for now for the situation report. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment what you think about Putin's isolation or not isolation in the Arab world that are housing Western bases that are being considered mostly friendly towards the West. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. This channel is only possible because of the support of viewers like you. If you like to support the channel, you can do so by the means of in the description. Thank you very much to everybody already supporting this channel. And that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.